Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to GPPAC Peace Education webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today and for your interest. My name is Federica Casaccio. I am the Sustainable Development Goals and Peace Education intern at GPPAC, and I work at the Knowledge Practice and Advocacy team. Before we get started, I would like to introduce GPPAC for those of you who are not familiar with our work, and then I will introduce our experts, Boggess and Diana Lepe. So GPPAC was founded in 2003 as a member-led network of civil society organizations active in the field of conflict prevention and peace building across the world. Our mission is to promote a shift in how the armed conflict is dealt with, a shift from reaction to prevention of armed conflict. How we do so, we work together with our members. We focus on the bottom-up approach and what our local members do and need. We have 15 networks of local organizations. Together with them, we try to prevent a conflict. We focus on different topics, such as human security, gender, dialogue and mediation, and one of them is peace education. Since 2006, GPPAC members from all corners of the world have been working together to exchange information, skills, and strategies on how best to engage and collaborate with key stakeholders in their education system. Our members have formed the Peace Education Working Group. It is a very unique working group, bringing together civil society, teachers, academia, and representatives of ministries of education or other relevant government agencies to build the capacity of peace educators, teachers, and civil society organizations to integrate peace education in national curricula, teacher training, and education-related policies and recommendations. We have one webinar planned every month where our members are sharing their expertise with you. Today, we have with us our experts, Annie and Diana, who are both working at Servicios y Asesoría para la Paz, Serapaz, Services and Consultancy for Peace, a Mexican civil society organization, will share more details about the format and results of the Peace School, as well as who the school is designed for and why this process is important in the current Mexican context. Diana is education coordinator, has been collaborating with the education team at Serapaz since 2010. One of the focuses of her work is the National Peace School, from which multiple follow-up projects have emerged over the years. These include regional peace schools for women and youth in various parts of Mexico, international peace schools in Central America and the Caribbean. Annie, education promoter, began serving with Serapaz since 2018. She came to Mexico City to collaborate with Serapaz education team and follow her passion for education as a way of building peace. Her work focuses on supporting social actors in situations of conflict in Mexico using popular education practices. While working as a middle school social studies teacher in Washington, D.C. from 2013 to 2018, she also designed an original U.S. history curriculum focused on education for peace. So welcome to Annie and Diana. And before I give you the floor, I would like to remind to our audience that if you have any questions, you can ask the questions via chat during the presentation, and then we will read them after the presentation. Or also you can raise your hand after the presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Federica. We are going to start sharing our presentation now. Desktop, yes. And just to clarify the format that we had thought about doing this presentation in, we're going to be doing it in both Spanish and English. Diana is going to share first in Spanish, and then I'll follow up in English for each slide. So I'm going to hand it over to Diana to start us off.
Nice to meet you, Ana and Julia. Bueno, y si quieren, pues vamos iniciando. Serapaz es una organización que se fundó en el 96, después o junto con el levantamiento del Ejército Zapatista y la comisión de intermediación que se abrió entre el Ejército Zapatista y el gobierno mexicano. La comisión que medió esto fue quien después haría Serapaz como un organismo administrativo que fue evolucionando hasta ser lo que es hoy, que somos quienes acompañamos los conflictos sociales, ¿no? En este sentido, son conflictos sociales, son conflictos que viven las comunidades, los movimientos sociales, los activistas que están en defensa por alguno de sus derechos o en general es por sus derechos, ¿no? Y desde ahí, desde el acompañamiento de sus conflictos, es que nosotros como Serapaz aportamos a la construcción de paz utilizando la metodología de transformación positiva de conflictos.
So I'm going to say pretty much what Diana said in Spanish, but in English, and maybe add in a little bit. We're sort of individualizing it slightly, but mostly I'm going to repeat the same information, but in English. So Serapaz was established in 1996. It began as a group of mediators to facilitate the conflict between the Zapatistas and the Mexican government. That conflict began in 1994. And as the process of dialogue went on, it became clear that while the actual organism that was doing the facilitation was no longer necessary after those two parties had reached an agreement, it was decided to establish Serapaz as an organization that would continue the work of accompanying social movements and communities in Mexico who are living processes of conflict. And that could be between communities, it could be between communities and the government, it could be between communities and big business, or any combination of different social groups in Mexico. And Serapaz uses a methodology called positive transformation of conflict, which we're going to be talking about a little bit more further on in the presentation.
Well, bueno, ¿por qué una escuela de paz? Frente a los conflictos que se estaban viviendo en México y que Serapaz iba acompañando, sobre todo en un gran auge a partir del 2006, y ante la preocupación que teníamos como organización de lo que estaba pasando, se dice, ¿por qué no? Además de acompañar en los conflictos, acompañar a las comunidades frente a lo que están viviendo con el gobierno, frente a la represión que tenían, frente a las imposiciones que estaban teniendo por megaproyectos, Serapaz dice, pues más bien compartamos la metodología de trabajo para que no seamos del todo tan necesarios, pero también para fortalecer las capacidades de los actores sociales, como nosotros le llamamos, ¿no? de los sujetos políticos, y que con ese fortalecimiento pues puedan avanzar en el abordaje de su conflicto, ¿no? Entonces la Escuela de Paz nace como el espacio para fortalecer con la metodología, explicándoles qué metodología usamos, qué herramientas tenemos, a quienes acompañamos para que también lo puedan usar de manera estratégica en el abordaje de su conflicto.
So the Peace School was founded in 2006, and basically Serapaz was looking at all the different conflicts that it was accompanying. This graphic shows sort of the four main categories. Well, it shows the way in which Serapaz conceptually organizes the different conflicts that are happening in Mexico. So we've got land and territory and the exploitation of natural resources, which often goes hand in hand with violation of economic, social, and cultural rights of indigenous peoples who are living on that land. That land belongs to them, and then folks come in and want to do other things and ignore those agreements, which also sort of goes hand in hand with democratic liberties, which in Mexico there's a lot of repression around journalism, right to protest, things like that. And then truth and justice around the issue of forced disappearance, which has been an issue in Mexico for a while. So basically in 2006, Serapaz decides we're going to keep doing our work with this direct accompaniment of all of these groups who are in these processes of social conflict, but we also want to create a space where we can share the methodology directly with a large group of, we call them social actors. In English, we might use the word activists. We also sometimes use the term political subjects. So the idea was to get a larger group of these folks together who are living all these different conflicts and share with them directly the Serapaz methodology, tools for advocacy, designing effective strategies, because obviously we want to keep, accompanying as many folks as we can, but we also really wanted to build up the capacities of basically as many people as possible who are living these situations of conflict.
¿Para quién es la Escuela de Paz? La Escuela de Paz, como ya lo mencionaba hace un momento, es para personas, colectivos, organizaciones, movimientos que viven un conflicto social, ¿no? Es a las personas que pertenecen a estos colectivos, a estos movimientos, para quienes está dirigida la Escuela de Paz principalmente. Por tanto, tenemos en el espacio a personas de la población indígenas que están tomando la escuela porque están viviendo despojo de su territorio. O tenemos a quienes pertenecen a colectivos de madres, padres, familiares de desaparecidos, que están luchando por encontrar a sus hijos, ¿no? O a sus familiares. Entonces, está dirigido a este tipo de participantes, y en una segunda escala, pues también en menor medida, pero que sí están presentes en la escuela, a organizaciones que acompañan estos movimientos sociales, ¿no? También. Ahora una característica de Serapaz, y como parte de que por donde nació la Escuela de Paz tiene que ver con fortalecer a quienes acompañamos. Muchos de quienes están en el proceso de la Escuela de Paz son personas que acompañamos, es decir, son colectivos, son comunidades que ya están en un acompañamiento con Serapaz o que son aliados de alguna forma por alguna otra red. Y eventualmente algunos otros que no son acompañados por nosotros, pero que ubicamos su lucha, su defensa, son quienes por lo general están en este espacio.
So as we were talking a little bit about in the previous slide, the Peace School is for social actors who are living processes of conflict. So we often get the question or the confusion that the Peace School might be for children, because we think of school perhaps as relating to children. So just to clarify, it's a school where adult activists in Mexico who are living these conflicts come together to develop their capacities. So I'm going to switch back to the previous slide for just a moment. Diana was just giving some examples of the people who come to the Peace School, looking at the Tierra y Territorio quadrant, which is land and territory. A lot of participants come to the Peace School who are members of Indigenous community who are involved in the defense of their land, their territory, their natural resources, their culture, their autonomy. We also have a lot of participants who are family members of disappeared people. So they're seeking verdad y justicia, which is truth and justice. So a lot of participants come from those collectives who are involved in that process. And we also invite some people who are from other organizations in Mexico who are doing similar accompaniment work to Serapaz to share the positive transformation of conflict methodology, and in the hope of enriching that accompaniment work as well as the work of the social actors who are directly living the conflict.
Ahora, la Escuela de Paz está organizada por 4 módulos y uno que le llamamos intermódulo. Estos módulos son más o menos el diseño para el acompañamiento que hace Serapaz. Entonces, en el módulo 1 lo que vemos y compartimos es todo el análisis de la conflictividad. Es decir, tomamos durante el proceso casos de quienes están presentes y que estén de acuerdo en tomarlos, y analizamos ese conflicto. Y otros que no tomamos sus casos, pero que sí están ahí, están viviendo conflictividad, van aportando con preguntas, dudas a partir de su propia experiencia para analizar este conflicto. En el módulo 2 lo que hacemos una vez que ya tenemos nuestro diagnóstico es hacer el diseño estratégico, ¿no? Una vez que tenemos nuestra situación inicial, empezamos a diseñar hacia dónde queremos ir, cuáles son nuestros objetivos, entre otras cosas, para decir, esta es la estrategia que he de implementar para abordar nuestro conflicto. En este proceso es también mucho trabajar y hacer muy consciente que hay que pensar de manera estratégica para abordar nuestro conflicto y que no hay que personalizar los conflictos, sino hay que abordar el tema, la causa de fondo, lo que nosotros llamamos estructural, para abordarlo. En el módulo 3 tenemos incidencia y comunicación. Una vez que tenemos nuestro diseño estratégico, lo que decimos es, hay muchas formas de abordar el conflicto, desde Serapaz tenemos experiencia en algunas, y esas son las que compartimos, que en este caso la incidencia se enfoca en sí como entender cuáles son los decisores a nivel nacional de acuerdo al Estado mexicano, y también a nivel internacional cómo podemos hacer incidencia para visibilizar lo que estamos viviendo, así como diseñar nuestros mensajes y nuestras estrategias de comunicación para darnos a conocer. En el intermódulo, que se da entre el tercer módulo y el último módulo, es seguridad y protección. Como México es un país que vive alta represión y que sus defensores y personas que están luchando viven mucha violencia por parte o del Estado mexicano o de otros actores particulares, como el crimen organizado, lo que hacemos es con quienes están viviendo situaciones de riesgo, damos este pequeño intermódulo, que se llama intermódulo porque es de una duración más corta, pero además es solo quienes son afectados en su integridad, ¿no? El resto del grupo no se reúne porque también se tocan temas delicados ahí, ¿no? Entonces es crear un espacio de mucha confianza entre quienes viven estas situaciones. Y por último, el cuarto módulo aborda los procesos de diálogo, ¿no? Entender que es un proceso de diálogo de manera general y tener algunos de estos elementos. Ahí es donde abordamos la negociación, la mediación, tanto frente al gobierno mexicano, pero también entre comunidades, y también abordamos los procesos de toma de decisiones que tienen que ver con un carácter interno y que a veces es ahí donde las propias comunidades y colectivos llegan a tener conflictos.
So the Peace School is divided into 4 modules. There's one module just about every 2 months. So the whole process happens over the course of a little bit less than a calendar year. And each module is about 3 days. So the first module is all about conflict analysis. And what we do in that first module is choose a few of the cases that the participants in that Peace School are living. And we sort of map out all of the aspects of that conflict. Who is involved? What are their interests? What's the timeline of events that has happened so far? Things like that, so we can get a really clear sense of exactly what is happening. And the participants who are not living one of the actual cases that we choose to sort of work on in this manner form groups to help support the analysis work of the participants who are analyzing the actual case that they're living. So then we move on to the design of strategies. And this module has a couple of purposes. One of them, Deanna was just saying, is to depersonalize the conflict a little bit and really dig into the structural problems or inequalities or sort of circumstances that are causing this conflict sort of at a deeper level. And then we also sort of, we take this module to identify what the vision is for the struggle or for the case that we're working on, and identify objectives, and then based on that, design specific strategies. And again, this is based on specific cases that the Peace School participants are living. So then the next couple of modules we share, so Serapaz uses all of those tools that I was just mentioning to analyze the conflict and design strategies. And then in terms of how we actually deal with sort of what to do about the conflict in our own accompaniment work is through policymaking and advocacy, strategic communication, and processes of dialogue, as well as protection and security measures. So the next 2 modules and then the intermodule also focus on sharing those specific strategies that Serapaz is an expert in. So in the 3rd module, we look at how the Mexican government is organized and sort of get into the details of exactly how to advocate in the different levels of power in the different regions, so Congress, Justice, President, and then also looking at how to strategically design our communications. So what the message is going to be, who the audience is going to be, whether it's on social media or in a formal press release, things like that. And then in processes of dialogue, we get into negotiation, mediation, different ways to make decisions. So that can be consensus building, that can be useful within a community or a collective, in addition to within their interactions with the party that they're in conflict with. And then in protection and security, it's called an intermodule because it's a little bit shorter, and not all of the Peace School participants come. Only the folks who are living in really high risk situations come to that intermodule. And it's a space where, you know, we're dealing with really sensitive topics and a lot of sensitive information. So it's a smaller group, and we spend 2 days working through identifying risks and how to minimize risks and some other strategies around that.
Y bueno, en la metodología de trabajo lo que usamos son formas de aprendizaje contextualizadas, es decir, reconocemos cada escuela vamos reconociendo cuál es el contexto que se vive, pero en lo cotidiano, a nivel coyuntural, pero también de manera estructural, vamos analizando lo que las participantes de ese momento están reconociendo, además de que en esta parte de su cotidianidad abordamos un conflicto de manera específica en la zona. Entonces, eso lleva a que el aprendizaje también lo ubiquen a partir de lo que están viviendo, pero de su propia práctica, de su propio abordaje, ¿no? Y desde ahí es que tomamos los elementos de la educación popular para que esto sea su práctica, pero a la vez su teoría. Tomamos elementos de educación para la paz a lo largo de la escuela, porque reconocemos que hay que hacer grupo. Entonces, a lo largo de toda la escuela vamos abordando desde el tema del conocimiento, desde fortalecer aspectos de comunicación, de confianza, de conocimiento de grupo, y para ir fortaleciendo al grupo y que al final de la escuela tengamos un grupo cohesionado y con confianza para poder hablar, dialogar y después articularse o colaborar de ser necesario, ¿no? En todo esto también las reflexiones que se van propiciando nos ayudan a ir generando comunidades de aprendizaje entre ellos, ¿no? Porque mucha de la riqueza de la escuela tiene que ver con la forma en la que, a partir del pretexto, de las herramientas, del análisis que están haciendo, van compartiendo sus aprendizajes, van compartiendo esto que van viviendo, que han ido viviendo, y analizando varios temas, ¿no? Alrededor de cada una de las cosas que les contábamos de cada módulo. Y por tanto se vuelve un conocimiento no solo múltiple por la diversidad de voces, sino también por la diversidad de personas que están ahí. Hay de comunidades indígenas, comunidades no indígenas, rurales, urbanas, jóvenes, adultos mayores, etcétera, ¿no? Y desde ahí es que nos vemos también, nos vemos con la responsabilidad de incluir una mirada intercultural, pero también de perspectiva de género, ¿no? Que cada vez tratamos de irla reforzando más para que el aprendizaje vaya siendo circular, ¿no? Y todos vayan comprendiendo el proceso, vayamos sintiendo lo nuestro.
So the Peace School is a Peace School, both because of its content and because of the way in which we organize it, and the kinds of pedagogy that the education team really focuses on utilizing during this time. So we use elements of peace education, elements of popular education, and elements of a theory called learning community, comunidad de aprendizaje. And we have a big focus on spending time on building trust and giving the participants opportunities to get to know each other, to share their experiences. We try to incorporate activities that are going to be effective for a lot of different kinds of learners. So there's a lot of hands-on, there's a lot of movement, there's visuals, in addition to, you know, some presentations for people who learn better with audio. So we really try to pull from a lot of these different methodologies in order to create a space that feels really safe, that feels really enriching. A lot of participants say that even just the relationships that they build and the experience of being in this space can be, in some cases, just as helpful as the actual content in terms of positive transformation of conflict. We also designed the Peace School with an eye to interculturalism, interculturality. Not quite sure how to translate that one into English, but the idea being that there are folks from indigenous communities, there are folks from big cities, there are folks from more rural parts of Mexico. Some people, Spanish is their second language. So we're really trying to, in each activity and in the tone and in the way that we facilitate the Peace School, really trying to have that in mind and make sure that it's a space where everyone feels seen, heard, included, represented, and that their contributions are really valued from all the different perspectives that people are bringing. And then we also do the same with gender perspectives. So trying to incorporate little moments where we can analyze how conflicts might be lived differently by men and women in a community, or how men and women might experience risk in different ways. So those are just a couple of examples of the ways in which we try to incorporate those perspectives into the whole Peace School.
Ok, entonces con todo esto los resultados que hemos ido teniendo es que en 14 años, ya casi 15, hay más de 500 personas que han participado en el proceso de escuela de paz, más de 10 escuelas regionales. Estas escuelas regionales han sido en alrededor de 9 regiones en el país, ¿no? 9 estados diferentes, donde hemos llevado a cabo estas escuelas, que no solo es parte de la metodología que ya les presentamos, sino que se van adaptando al contexto, es decir, a lo que se necesita en el lugar donde están haciendo la defensa. Y si hay temas que nosotros no abordamos, nos coordinamos y nos articulamos con otras y otros para que esté dentro del complejo de la escuela regional, planeándola con ellos, ¿no? Más de 5 escuelas internacionales. Como ya les decía Ani hace un momento, casi al inicio, esas escuelas internacionales han sido en Centroamérica, en Honduras, en Guatemala y una en Costa Rica, y ha sido en Caribe, en Cuba, ¿no? Estas escuelas internacionales también se han ido adaptando como las escuelas regionales, ¿no? Tanto a la cultura como a la necesidad in situ que hay ahí, ¿no? Y hemos tenido varios movimientos que han optado por estrategias no violentas, ¿no? Algunas de lo que nos han ido diciendo es, si yo no hubiera venido a la escuela de paz, seguro que ya estaría preso o presa porque habríamos tomado armas, habríamos hecho alguna acción violenta que llevara a otras consecuencias para ellos y que su lucha se redirigiera, ¿no? Entonces, esos son solo algunos de los resultados que hemos tenido.
So over the past 14 years, now almost 15 years, over 500 people have participated in the Peace School. These same modules with the same methodology has been replicated in over 10 different regions within Mexico. And each of those uses sort of the National Peace School as a base, and then adapts some of the specifics of the content or even of the pedagogy that's involved to the context of the region. And then there have been more than 5 international peace schools. They were in Guatemala,
Honduras, Cuba, Costa Rica.
Those. And then as Deanna was saying, it's a little bit hard to quantify exactly how many movements, collectives, communities have opted for nonviolent change-making strategies, because sometimes we see a really big shift or a really big focus on the positive transformation of conflict methodology, and sometimes we just get sort of anecdotal verbal feedback about this really changed the way that I see my conflict, or I was carrying around so much anger and I've been able to let go of some of that a little bit in order to focus more strategically on how to deal with my conflict. Or Deanna was just giving the example of a participant who had said, if it wasn't for the Peace School, I would have I would have been in prison by now, because I would have, you know, our community was thinking about taking up arms and dealing with this conflict in a violent way. And because we thought we had reached a point in the process that we just thought that there were no other options. And then the Peace School offered some different ideas about how to deal with that conflict. So those are the results of the Peace School. And that's the end of our presentation. And we were really trying to do it on time, and it looks like we did it under time. So there we are. We'd be happy to answer any questions that there might be at this point.
Okay, so thank you very much for your very interesting presentation and stories. So yeah, I would also like to open the floor to the questions and comments. As I said, you can ask the questions via chat, or if you prefer, you can raise your hand. So let's see if we have any questions. Okay, so it looks like there are no questions for now, but I would like to ask a question to you, Diana and Annie. So as you said, there are now many Peace Schools in the region in Mexico. And so I would like to ask you, how do you involve local communities to take part to the courses that the Peace School offer? So how do you engage with local communities? How do you advertise that you are offering this this initiative, and that you have developed this program, and that might be useful for the community itself?
Cool. Diana is going to answer first in Spanish, and then I'll translate into English.
La forma de involucrar es a partir de la Escuela Nacional. Varias de las personas que están viviendo justo un conflicto nos piden que vayamos a apoyarles en la réplica de la escuela, y es ahí donde empezamos a generar un proceso como de escuela regional. Hay con quienes se ha quedado en un taller y hay con quienes ha sido un proceso de escuela que ha durado desde 1 año hasta 4 años, ¿no? Entonces, depende mucho de esas personas que se muestren interesadas a partir también de la Escuela Nacional que vamos generando la articulación.
Diana is saying that a lot of folks who have already participated in or heard about the National Peace School then go back to their home communities and share that information, and it generates interest. And so often people who are living situations of conflict will actually seek out Serapaz folks to ask for a workshop or even a full year-long process of the International Peace School, based on sort of hearing about experiences that people have lived in the National Peace School in Mexico City.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to both of you. So we have a question from Ana Elisa Peña del Valle, and her question is in Spanish. So I'm gonna ask you in Spanish, and maybe either Annie, you can translate it in English, or I can also translate it in English. So the question is, ¿podría compartir alguna experiencia reciente sobre el uso de la Escuela de la Paz para mediar conflictos en el territorio y el uso de los recursos naturales?
Pues mira, hay una que de hecho todavía seguimos acompañándoles en el proceso. Bueno, uno como tal en proceso de diálogo fue una comunidad llamada Xochicuautla, cerca de la Ciudad de México. Es una comunidad otomí, indígena otomí, y ellos empezaron un proceso con Serapaz de diálogo, y que después en su participación en la escuela fortaleció. Han estado 3 personas diferentes de la comunidad, todas ellas con una capacidad de decisión y de comunicación con la comunidad. Entonces, con ellos ha sido a partir de la escuela y escuchando con otros, pues interactuar, reflexionar sobre su propio proceso que han ido llevando a las mesas de negociación. Actualmente, lo que se llegó, a ellos les iban a imponer una carretera que iba a atravesar su bosque, y durante el proceso lo que ellos hicieron fue, reconocer su poder, ¿no? Qué tanta capacidad tenían para detener o no la carretera. Ellos ubicaron que no tenían la capacidad en ese momento comunitaria para detener la autopista, y lo que decidieron fue hacer una contrapropuesta de proyecto carretero al gobierno federal para que se hiciera con el diseño que ellos tenían y que respetaba a su bosque, y también el paso a sus terrenos, a sus zonas de trabajo. Entonces, eso lo fueron reformulando en el camino, tanto del acompañamiento de Serapaz por otras áreas, como en el proceso con la escuela, ¿no? Cómo ir, lo que nosotros llamamos reformulando su conflicto al ubicar cuáles son los elementos con los que contaban.
Should I translate that into English?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So the question was if we could share the story of a specific experience that we've had in the Peace School to mediate a conflict around land and territory and the use of natural resources. So Diana was talking about a process that we've been accompanying for several years now. The community is called Xochicuautla. It's an indigenous community of Otomi folks. So they started their process with Serapaz, also in a point where they sort of needed some more clarity about how to sort of move forward with their conflict. Basically, the government was planning to build a highway that was, and a small portion of it was going to pass through Xochicuautla's territory, through their community. And this was a small piece of a really long highway that was being marketed throughout Mexico as an important development opportunity, more infrastructure, things like that. So through their process with the Peace School and with Serapaz's accompaniment more generally, they went through a process of basically analyzing and sort of reformulating their conflict. So first, they really had to go through the experience of recognizing that they as a community, it's a pretty small community. In that moment, they did not have the capacity to stop the project as a whole. So through this process of the Peace School and designing strategies and their conflict analysis, they decided to offer to the government sort of an alternative design for that portion of highway so that it wouldn't disrupt their access to their natural resources, and so that it wouldn't have such a big negative environmental impact. And they brought that design to dialogue. You said the diálogo in English is
Discourses, dialogue.
Yeah, dialogue process.
From the government.
Yeah. Sometimes I forget my English, my apologies. But so they brought this to their process of dialogue, and the government accepted it. And right now that construction process is underway, incorporating the design that this community came up with and offered through their process with the Peace School.
Okay, thank you. That was really, really interesting. We have time, I think, for another question. If some of our participants want to ask something. Okay, if not, so I think I will ask one last question for today for you, Annie and Diana. So you have mentioned that some people who attended, who participated in the school, in the Peace School, told you that that was a really great experience, and that without this alternative, they would have ended up in conflict, how to say, environment. So, or they would have maybe decided to use violence as a way to escape from their realities. So could you maybe share one personal story of one of the participants at the school, of the Peace School?
Serapaz?
Por ejemplo, hace unos años estábamos apoyando el acompañamiento de la comunidad de Temacapulín, que siguen luchando para que no se termine de hacer la presa del Zapotillo. Nos habían pedido que les acompañáramos y abriéramos una mesa con el gobernador del estado de Jalisco. Y la comunidad, cuando fueron a acompañarles mucha gente solidaria, tomó la presa, la construcción de la presa. Y le piden a Serapaz que intervengan porque ya estaban por llegar la policía para desalojarlos, ¿no? Y los desalojos acá de ese estilo son con mucha violencia y la mayoría de la comunidad es gente de la tercera edad. Algunos jóvenes, los más jóvenes, que ya son migrantes en la ciudad de Guadalajara, ¿no? Que pertenece al estado de Jalisco. Y Serapaz interviene, se abre una mesa de mediación para ya empezar a tener este diálogo con el gobernador y la comunidad, sobre todo los jóvenes que ya vivían en la ciudad, se enojan mucho con Serapaz porque lo que hace Serapaz es negociar que a cambio de que no les violenten, se abra la mesa de negociación. Eso se dialogó también con una parte de las personas de la comunidad, pero que se levantaba el plantón de la presa. Muchos se enojaron. Serapaz tuvo le hicieron llegar varios, pues desacreditación vía redes sociales a Serapaz. Y 2 años después, una de las compañeras más enojadas por el proceso de mediación vino a la Escuela de Paz. Y una vez que estuvo acá, en medio de la exposición justo de mediación y de negociación, la compañera se para y le pide una disculpa a quien en ese momento estaba exponiendo y que había sido la mediadora en su proceso, y le dice: discúlpame, ahora entiendo por qué hicieron lo que hicieron. Yo fui una de las que hablé y dije muchas cosas contra Serapaz. Les pido una gran disculpa porque ahora entiendo su trabajo, su labor, y entiendo lo complicado de la situación en la que están cuando hacen esas cosas, y que lo hicieron para que a nosotros no nos madrearan, ¿no? No nos reprimieran.
Wow. This is so cool, you guys. I actually hadn't heard this story before, but okay, I'm gonna do my best to translate it. It's pretty amazing. So a few years ago, the community of, ¿cómo se llama? Temacapulín was in a conflict over natural resources in the state of Jalisco. So some members of that community, there's a dam being constructed, and some members of that community sort of occupied that construction site by force, and other members of the community approached Serapaz and asked to open a process of dialogue with the governor of the state of Jalisco. So this was really complicated because the members of the community who had decided that they wanted to use the strategy of physically occupying and defending the space that was being constructed into a dam were super upset about this. They didn't feel that this process represented what they wanted, or that it wouldn't get them what they needed, what they wanted. And so a lot of those members of that community were feeling really negatively towards Serapaz, and you know, in social media and sort of in sort of public communications, were sort of really opposed to this process of dialogue that Serapaz was facilitating. And then a little while later, one of the members of that community came to participate in the Peace School, and through the process of learning about sort of the philosophy, values, and the strategy behind the methodology of positive conflict transformation, Diana was just saying that she actually apologized to the Serapaz team member who was both facilitating that presentation and also had actually been one of the mediators in that situation, because she said at the time she just didn't understand how it could be effective, or or why a community would engage in that process when you could just sort of, you know, defend yourself in a different way. but that through the process of the Peace School, she understood that Serapaz and using this methodology is really trying to make sure that people stay physically safe, because during that process of occupation, they were, at huge risk of physical violence on the part of the government. So the process of the Peace School brought this sort of deeper understanding and more clarity around how a process of dialogue could both accomplish the goals of a community, but also make sure that people don't get hurt as much. So yeah, there's that example.
Wow, thank you. That's really an amazing story. And so now, since there are no more questions, I would like to thank once again Annie and Diana. Really, thank you very much for sharing with us your expertise, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Federica, for facilitating.
Thank you.
Thanks for listeners.
Thanks for listening to us.
Thank you. So I would like to remember to our audience and viewers that we have recorded the webinar and that it will be available on our website, www.gpac.net, and you could share it with your contacts. And if you would like to stay updated about our upcoming webinars, please check our website. The next one will be held on the 31st of January, and it will be given by our colleague Edward Kingston Jambla, who is Regional Conflict Analyst for West Africa Network for Peacebuilding, WANEP. And the webinar will be on violent extremism and terrorism, exploring new frontiers in West Africa. So thank you very much to everyone, and have a good evening.